Thank you, Fizzle.
He ran up on a chop, he's a boxer. Pow, right in the kisser. It's a stick, this a drum, I'll drop some, nigga. Pow, right in the kisser. I'ma shoot the K until the cops come. Pow, right in the kisser. We did him like that cause he's a spot burner. Pow, right in the kisser. Pull up with the stick with the drum, who won't run with me? Pow, right in the kisser. Stupid shells dumping out the chop, it's 100. Pow, right in the kisser. I'ma pull it out the Louis bag, don't come for me. Pow, right in the kisser. I just dumped a nigga in some Christian Louboutins. Pow, right in the kisser. I just shot a nigga granny house, don't care who in there. Pow, right in the kisser. I can't trust the niggas that I hang with, they be shooting kids. Pow, right in the kisser.
I smoke a nigga like a Swiss or a pack of cigs.
Pow, right in the kisser.
I pull up with a chop on the ops and split a wig. For real.
Pow, right in the kisser.
I broke his bitch, he poppin', now I'm poppin' on fig.
Pow, right in the kisser.
We didn't drop by, we walked him down, put him in a ditch.
Pow, right in the kisser.
I got this FN across a nigga, treat him like a Christian.
Pow, right in the kisser.
And my Christian Louboutins running, chasing me a victim.
Pow, right in the kisser.
The 762's flipping, I put him in a blender.
Pow, right in the kisser.
A bartender, I give him shots, now he look drunk like he on liquor.
Pow, right in the kisser.
Those are not Glocks, buddy, those are ghost guns.
Those ain't real.
Pow, right in the kisser.
My homie smoked too many ops, he don't got no lungs.
He ain't even got no lungs.
Pow, right in the kisser.
223 shells, nigga, that's for King Kong.
That's what the dick ass.
Pow, right in the kisser.
Go play that Roof Chris, bitch, that's my theme song.
We eat that Roof Chris every time we wax.
Pow, right in the kisser.
In this belly backpack is a big strap.
Some shit that really can't even fit in his back.
Pow, right in the kisser.
He got flip hollows, turned him to a Big Mac.
Turn his dumb ass to a burger or something.
Pow, right in the kisser.
Dead man, that's a homie you can't get back.
He's no longer, he can't come back.
Pow, right in the kisser.
Stripping every buster nigga at them kickbacks.
They have no chains on them.
Pow, right in the kisser.
Riding around the city with two straps, I feel like John Wick.
Pow, right in the kisser.
Caught in front of that store, so I flicked him like a bit.
Like a lighter.
Pow, right in the kisser.
Bitches choosing sides cause they knowin' we the shit.
They them niggas, we got sticks.
Pow, right in the kisser.
But we don't give them shit, we just run them, then we dip.
We did. We run them.
Pow, right in the kisser.
Bro dropped 50, so I had to place the order.
The order?
Pow, right in the kisser.
Chop his head off and throw his body across the border.
I flipped him like a quarter.
Pow, right in the kisser.
You was not a slider, nigga, you the hood porter.
Those are the stones you think shit.
Pow, right in the kisser.
You could date the bitch if you got the feed to afford her.
You can't buy that bitch.
Pow, right in the kisser. He's never coming back in that stack. Pow, right in the kisser. I'ma shoot it till my hand cramp. Pow, right in the kisser. I ain't finna go in bareback, bitch. Pow, right in the kisser. You love me, then come let my friends crash. Pow, right in the kisser. I caught him like in the C class. Pow, right in the kisser. They gon' have to run a beat back. Pow, right in the kisser. You go against the team, you need cash. Pow, right in the kisser. I caught his mama at the repass. Pow, right in the kisser.
Another nigga dead, you gotta deal with it.
I mean, it's been a long ass time ago.
Pow, right in the kisser.
You an internet thug, I'm in the real trenches.
You just pop it on the ground, weird ass nigga.
Pow, right in the kisser.
He wanna squabble up, I wanna kill niggas.
I'ma hit him with this chop, we ain't gon' box.
Pow, right in the kisser.
I'm from the stink team and saw real niggas.
We run this shit, y'all weird.
Pow, right in the kisser.
I nutted her face and told her deal with it.
Splashed all on the motherfucker's face.
Pow, right in the kisser.
I was cooking in the county on the grill, nigga.
I was whipping up all type of fancy shit.
Pow, right in the kisser.
I was really in K-Town taking field trips.
Ling Ling, May Ling, Kim Wong and all.
Pow, right in the kisser.
All dome shot, we tryna split wigs.
We tryna rearrange some shit.
Pow, right in the kisser.
Man, niggas know what the fuck going on, nigga.
Pow, right in the kisser.
Man, he's never coming back in that stat, nigga. Man, let that shit go, bro. Like,
Pow,
shit
right
is
in the
ridiculous.
kisser.
Like, you niggas still holding on to grudges and all that shit from 3 years ago, man.
Pow,
Like,
right in the kisser.
I'm just saying, like, y'all niggas, like, it's come on, bro. Like,
Pow, right in the
like,
kisser.
it's over with, bro. Like, man, like, come on,
Pow,
bro.
right in the kisser.
He's never coming back in that stat. Like,
Pow, right in the kisser.
like, just face it, bro. Like, y'all just holding on to this shit, like, nigga.
Pow, right in the
What y'all
kisser.
gonna do? Wait till somebody else get flipped? Like, what's going on?
Pow, right in the kisser.
Yeah, exactly, nigga. Yeah.
Pow, right in the kisser. Pow, right in the kisser.
Pow, right in the kisser. Pow,
Pow right in the kisser. Pow right in the kisser. Right in the kisser.
Come on, bro.
Pow right
He's
in the
no
kisser.
longer.
Pow right in the kisser.
We Japanese still. You getting cooked in front of your family? Like a Japanese meal. It's y'all shoot the hibachi and none of you niggas can stop me. But can't help but watch me. As promised, we're going to finish chapter 2 today of the Mali Empire in the book Empires of the Medieval West Africa. We dealt with Ghana and we dealt with the introduction and the build-up. Now we're going to deal with the Mali Empire, right? So the book places these three empires in order. Ghana, remember, Ghana is Ouagadougou, and Ouagadougou is much, it's further north than it is in present day Ghana. Present day Ghana, as we learned in the last episode, was named in honor of ancient Ghana. And you know what's funny? Because I just got Hogwarts Legacy, and there's a character that's coming from Uganda, but they named the school Ouagadougou. They named the school Wizardly, however you say it, Ouagadougou, and I thought that was pretty neat. You know, as you know, we're history buffs and we know what that means. So I thought that was a good nugget that they put in there for the African school of wizardry, you know, and Hogwarts Legacy and whatnot. Anyway, happy Black History Month. I hope you guys are enjoying the series so far. We are going to learn about the Mali Empire today. So I hope you guys are excited. You know, I hope you got your notepads open. I hope you guys really get something out of this, man. Again, happy Black History Month. So with that being said, let's learn some Black history. All right. Blow this up. All right, chapter 2, the Mali Empire. Let me get this banner going. Fair use, because we're doing this for education purposes and research and scholarship purposes. So we are covered under Section 107 of the Fair Use Act. It says here, the Mali Empire. While the Ghana Empire was gradually declining, the Soninke people who left its cities helped found several smaller kingdoms. The small Soninke states of Kenyaga, Diarra, and Mema rose to the south of Ghana. The savanna lands there were closer to Upper Niger River and its tributaries and had a less harsh climate. By the 12th century, some of the kings of these small states were Muslims, but most of the population continued to practice the polytheistic worship of more than one god religion of their ancestors. One of the strongest of these states was Susu. It was ruled through a powerful family of blacksmiths with the family name Kante. A blacksmith is someone who works with iron. The traditional priests of many Mundi peoples have usually been blacksmiths because they knew the secrets of how to use fire to turn raw iron ore into tools and weapons that were essential for daily life. By late in the 12th century, Susu had expanded into the neighboring regions and extended its authority over part of the old Ghana Empire. The kingdom was centered into a region that is now called Beladougou. It is northeast of Bamako, the capital of today's Republic of Mali. The local people identify their communities with ancient Susu, and there's even a village called Susu. Most of the information about Susu kingdoms comes from the Mande oral tradition and cannot be confirmed by independent sources. There is no material evidence to support this oral tradition because no archaeological excavation has been done in that region, but the existence of a Susu kingdom is confirmed by Arab geographers. Ibn Khaldun, 1332 to 1406, who was born in Tunis and died in Cairo, never traveled south of the Sahara himself, but while he was in Cairo, he interviewed people from the Mali Empire. From them, he learned that Susu was the most powerful of the new kingdoms and that it had taken over some of the old territories of Ghana. According to Mande oral tradition, the Susu ruler in the 13th century was Sumanguru Kante. He was described as a great sorcerer and a ruthless conqueror. Just to the south of Susu in the land of Mandan, there were many small chiefdoms of the Mandi people on both banks of the Niger River. These chiefdoms were basically independent, although they shared cultural institutions, traded with one another, and married people from different chiefdoms. At the beginning of the 13th century, Sumenguru expanded his territory southward. He conquered the Mandi chiefdoms and added them to his Susu empire. The Sunhata epic. The Mandi's people's own story about the origin of the Mali Empire is usually known as the Sunhata epic. It is named for Sunhata Keita, who is credited with founding the Mali Empire. An epic is a story about the actions and adventures of a heroic or legendary figures or about the history of a nation. The story begins sometime around the beginning of the 13th century in Farakoro, which was a Mande kingdom. Farakoro was near the gold fields of Bure. These gold fields had been one of the main sources of gold for Ghana in earlier centuries, and they became important for the Mali Empire too. The chief of Farakoro was Magan Kanfara. Magan means chief, and Kanfara was the town he lived in. Like all chiefs and kings of his day, Magan Kanfara had diviners whose job it was to predict the future. One day, the diviners told Magan Kanfara that he would be the father of a great hero, but that the woman would be the hero's mother had not yet been found. Magan Kanfara already had many other wives, but he had to search for this special woman. After a long search, the woman was finally located in the kingdom of Doni Kiri. She was Sogalan Konde, a sister of the Mansa. Sogalan was an ugly hunchback woman, but she had frightening powers as a sorceress and was recognized as a woman who was destined to give birth to this great hero. So she was brought to Farakoro and married Magan Kanfara. Magan Kanfara's other wives were jealous of the diviners' predictions and did everything they could to stop Sogalan from giving birth to the hero. After several years of trouble, Sogalan had a baby, but this child was born crippled. He was called Sogalan Jara. Jara means lion, which was shortened to Sunhata. Abo spelled Sundiata. It took years for Sunhata to learn to walk, but when he finally did, he became a great hunter. One of Magan Kanfara's other wives had a son who was born before Sunhata. The other wife knew the diviners had predicted the Sunhata would be a great hero, but she was determined that her son would be the next chief. She tried to have Sunhata murdered. Sogalan then took him and her other children away to protect them. They stopped in various chiefdoms along the way. Eventually, they traveled northeast to the lands beyond Timbuktu and settled in the old Suniki kingdom of Mema. As you can see, this is a depiction of Malian women working in the ancient Malian gold field of Bori. Use calabashes to pan for gold dust. While Sogalan and her children were gone, the Mande chieftains were conquered by an army of Susu, which was led by its powerful king, Sumenguru Kante. The Mande people suffered for a long time under the harsh rule of Sumenguru. Then they remembered that many years earlier, the diviners had predicted that Sogalan would give birth to a great hero. They did not know where Sogalan and her children had gone, but they sent out a search party and eventually found them. Sogalan had died in Mema, but her children, who were now adults, returned to Mandan. Sunhata organized the soldiers of all Mande chiefdoms into a powerful army. They went to war against Susu. After a series of battles, Sunhata army defeated Sumenguru and the army of Susu. The unified Mande chiefdoms formed the basis of a powerful kingdom and expanded into all neighboring territories and became the Mali Empire. The Mande oral traditions do not give dates for the events they describe, but based on what was written by Arab geographers, it appears that Susu was defeated sometime in the 1230s. From Samhata to Sakura, there are 3 Arab geographers and historians who have provided the most detailed information about the medieval Mali Empire: Al-Umari, Ibn Battuta, and Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun reported that Mali became the greatest power in Western Sudan. He said the greatest king of Mali overcame the Susu and conquered their country and was named Mali Hatta. This is one of the praise names, substitutes for a person's name that describe his or her best characteristics or deeds. Local people still use for Sunhata. According to Ibn Khaldun, Sunhata ruled for 25 years. When he died, his son Mansa Wali became king. Wali is remembered as a great king. He was a Muslim and he made pilgrimage to Mecca during the reign of Sultan Baybars of Egypt. Sultan Baybars ruled from 1260 to 1277, so Wali made his pilgrimage sometime between those dates. Despite becoming one of the greatest empires of the medieval era, Mali suffered from serious leadership problems throughout its history. Wali was followed by a brother named Wadi, who was not remembered for anything special. After Wadi came a third brother named Khalifa, who is remembered for the wrong reasons. Khalifa was insane and practiced archery, shooting with a bow and arrow. By shooting arrows at his own people and killing them, eventually the people killed him. The next monster was Abu Bakr. He was the son of one of Sanhada's daughters, a sister of the three previous kings. This is similar to the matrilineal descent that was custom in the Ghana Empire, where the kingship went to the son of the previous king's sister. Although there are no records of it, Mali's unfortunately, Sakura was killed on his way back from the pilgrimage. Since he was not a member of the royal family, the kingship passed on to two of the Sanhada's descendants. Neither of them left any memories or important deeds. After their reigns were over, the power passed to the descendants of Sanhada's brother, Mandembori. Mandembori's descendant, Mansa Musa, would prove to be one of the greatest rulers of the Mali Empire. Mansa Musa the Great. And all you guys should be familiar with Mansa Musa. He's a very famous name in the community, that circulates in the community. So Mansa Musa the Great. Mansa Musa was famous for his piety, devotion to his religion, and generosity. His 25-year reign from 1312 to 1337 is thought of as the golden age of Mali. Islamic scholar Ibn Kathir, 1300 to 1374, reported that Mansa Musa was a young, handsome man who had 24 lesser kings under his authority. Al-Umari was told that Musa had conquered 24 cities, each with its surrounding district with villages and estates, and that his palace was rich and splendid. The royal flag that flew over Mansa Musa when he rode out on horseback was yellow with a red background. When the Mansa officially met with people, he carried gold weapons, including a bow and arrow, symbols of royal power in Mali. Mansa Musa sat on a large ebony throne that was on a raised platform with elephant tusks along the sides. Behind the king stood about 30 slaves, including ones from Turkey and Egypt. Over the Mansa head, one of the slaves held a large silk sunshade topped by a golden falcon. The lesser kings sat in two rows on both sides, and beyond them were the commanders of the cavalry. In front of the Mansa stood the sword bearer of chief executioner and chief spokesman called a jelly. The Mansa never spoke aloud in public, but whispered what he wanted to say to the jelly, who would make the announcements. Music accompanied his public appearances. There were different sized drums, trumpets made of elephant tusks, and a kind of xylophone called the bala that is famous for its beautiful sound. There are always two horses, far more expensive than camels, tied nearby, ready for the Mansa to ride whenever he needed them. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage. Of all of the sub-Saharan West African rulers who made the pilgrimage to Mecca, Mansa Musa was the most famous. When he was preparing for the journey, he consulted his diviners to find out the best time to leave. The diviners told Mansa Musa he should wait until a Saturday that would fall on the 12th day of the month. This meant he had to wait 9 months before he could leave, which he did. The journey across the Sahara Desert took about a year and was extremely difficult. Thousands of people are said to have accompanied Mansa Musa. The king took along his senior wife, Inari Kanute, who had hundreds of her own servants and slaves. There were also Muslims from among the Mali court, officials, and merchant community, soldiers to protect the caravan, camel drivers, servants, and slaves. There were thousands of camels and donkeys to carry food, water, and other supplies. The caravan is said to have included 80 loads of gold dust. In addition to the animals, there were slaves to help carry the loads. When the caravan arrived in Egypt, the slaves were sold. Later, others were purchased for the return journey. The king meets the Sultan. When Mansa Musa arrived in Egypt in July 1324, his huge caravan camped outside Cairo near the Great Pyramids. Distinguished visitors were expected to visit the Sultan of Egypt, but Mansa Musa repeatedly refused to do so. He knew that everyone who met this Sultan was required to kiss the ground in front of him. Mansa Musa was used to having people sprinkle dust on their on their heads when they came before him in expression of humility and respect. So he was not prepared to kiss the ground for the Sultan. He finally did meet the Sultan and bowed as if praying, then declared that he would only get down on the ground to God who created me. The Sultan welcomed Mansa Musa and presented him with expensive gifts. When Mansa Musa arrived in Egypt in July 1324, his huge caravan camped outside of Cairo near the Great Pyramids. His visit to Egypt created a sensation because he carried such a huge amount of gold with him and was extremely generous in his gift giving. Among the gifts he sent to the Sultan of Egypt were 40,000 dinars. He also gave 10,000 dinars to the Sultan's deputy and was similarly generous to everyone at the Egyptian court. When the visitors from Mali shopped in the Cairo market, the merchants took advantage of them and charged them 5 dinars for things that were only worth 1. Mansa Musa distributed so much gold as gifts, and the Malians spent such large amounts in the market that gold declined in value and did not recover for several years. Mansa Musa stayed at Cairo for 3 months before he continued on to Arabia and the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Such a journey could be extremely dangerous. Sakura was killed on the way home. This was true even for an emperor as rich and powerful as Mansa Musa, who had a large armed guard and thousands of people with him. Entire caravans had been known to lose their way and die in great sandstorms of the Sahara. Some wells were several days' journey apart, and in dry year, there might not be enough water for even a small caravan. Desperate travelers would sometimes kill their camels and drink the liquid out of their humps. On Mansa Musa's journey, he and his caravan suffered great hardships crossing the Sahara. They narrowly escaped disaster returning to Cairo from Mecca. Sub-Saharan pilgrims were unfamiliar with the route from Egypt to Arabia, so the usual practice was for them to join the Arab caravan in Cairo and accompany it to Mecca. According to Ibn Khaldun, when Mansa Musa and his entourage were returning from Mecca to Cairo, they got separated from the main caravan without any Arab companions to show them the way. They were completely lost and could not find water. They wandered until finally they came to the seashore at Suez, where the Suez Canal will be built more than 5 centuries later. They ate whatever fish they could find, and anyone who stayed from the main group was kidnapped by local Bedouin people, nomads who wanted the Arabian Peninsula, and taken as a slave. The survivors were finally rescued, but according to Muhammad al-Husani al-Makrizi, an Egyptian historian and geographer, as many as a third of Mansa Musa's people and camels died. Connections: Timbuktu. Early every morning in the streets of Timbuktu, Songhai women baked delicious loaves of bread in clay ovens. Few places in the world have captured people's imaginations the way Timbuktu has. From the time people outside of Africa first heard of it, Timbuktu has seemed more like a mystical, timeless place than a city with a real history. No European ever saw it and returned to tell about it until French explorer Rene finally did in 1828. The popular saying from here to Timbuktu seems to place it at the very ends of the earth, but in fact, Timbuktu is a city in the modern Republic of Mali. In the days of the Mali and Songhai empires, Timbuktu was an important market city for the trans-Saharan trade and a center of Islamic scholarship. In the 17th century, when European market ships increasingly traded along the West African coast, the trans-Saharan trade routes began to lose their importance, and Timbuktu gradually sank into economic decay. Nowadays, small camel caravans from salt mines 400 miles to the north still arrive in the winter, but the great days of the trans-Saharan trade have been gone for centuries. The Sahara Desert, which once brought profitable commerce to Timbuktu, has now become a threat to the city's survival. Drifting and blown by dry seasonal wind called the Hamatan, threatens to smother some neighborhoods. The expansion of the desert has already destroyed vegetation and damaged the water supply of some buildings. As part of the effort to save this historical city, in 1990, Timbuktu was placed on the World Heritage List of Endangered Places, and a conservation program was established by UNESCO. More recently, Timbuktu has received an economic boost by becoming a tourist destination. Every winter during the Christmas and New Year holiday season, when daytime temperatures are comfortable and nights are chilly, tourists from all over the world come by plane and riverboat for overnight visits. They send out postcards boasting to their friends and relatives they have been to Timbuktu. What is more important, they provide employment for the local people. The return to Mali. By the time Mansa Musa was ready to return to Mali, he had used up all his gold. To pay for his journey home, he had to borrow money at a very high rate of interest. Like any traveler to foreign lands, Mansa Musa saw things he wanted to take home with him. In this case, there were also some people he wanted to take home. When he was in Mecca, he offered 1,000 Meccans to any Sharafa, direct descendants of Muhammad, who would go back to Mali with him. Four of them eventually agreed to go. They accompanied him with their families and settled permanently in Mali. Mansa Musa also returned with an Arab architect, a person who designs buildings from Spain named Abu Ishaq al-Sahili. The architect built Mansa Musa's a rectangular house with a dome on top. The house was covered with plaster that was decorated with colorful designs. This marked the introduction of an architectural style that can still be seen in many towns and cities of the Western Sudan. One of the Mansa Musa's residences was in Timbuktu, and al-Sahili settled there. He thought to have built the Jengaraber Mosque in Timbuktu on the orders of Mansa Musa. The Jengaraber Mosque was built in Timbuktu in 1324 to 1327 by the Spanish architect Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, who was commissioned by Mansa Musa. And there's an image here. Commerce brings prosperity. All the same goods that were traded in the regional markets of the Ghana Empire from 10th to the 12th centuries were still traded in the markets of Mali from the 13th to 15th centuries. The main difference was that at the height of Mali's power, it controlled far more territory than Ghana ever did, so it had even more to sell. By the beginning of the 14th century, Mali's expansion into the inland delta, Gayo, and the eastern Songhai provinces added enormously to the farming, grazing, hunting, and fishing resources of the empire. The new territories also provided additional sources of slaves for trade, military service, and farm production. Tribute from kings and chiefs in Mali territory and taxes from newly controlled trade routes enriched the government treasury. Connections. Beautiful, bloody ivory. In the Mali Empire, ivory was one of the most profitable exports, along with gold, salt, and slaves. Throughout all the centuries of North African and European trade, untold numbers of elephants were killed for the ivory. And if you guys remember when we covered the Peter Marks book on the West African, pretty much the Jews in West Africa, one of the major things that they were trading was spoons made out of ivory. That was a hot commodity then, and it was a hot commodity back in Mansa Musa's time. It says here, numbers of elephants were killed for their ivory. Between 1979 and 1989, when trading in ivory was still illegal, records were kept of the slaughter. During the 10 years, so many elephants were killed for their ivory that the population of African elephants was cut from 1.3 million to approximately 600,000. The scale of poaching, illegal hunting, was so great that it harmed the economies of African countries that had to spend a great deal of money to fight poachers. During the ivory wars that were fought to stop the slaughter, many poachers and game wardens, people who enforced hunting regulations, were killed. The Convention to International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora tried to control the ivory trade, but they failed, and most of the ivory trade came from poached elephants. In 1989, CITES banned all international trade in elephants and their parts, including skins and ivory. This ban had wide support. It halted the devastation of populations and provided the opportunity for African elephants to begin a slow but promising recovery. In 1997, things began going wrong again for the elephants. Botswana, Namibia, and Zimbabwe, which have some large elephant herds, requested the CITES lift its strict ban on the ivory trade. This would allow the export of elephant skins, tourist souvenirs made from ivory and skins, and live animals. Only Zimbabwe was allowed to export elephant skins. In June 1998, Zimbabwe sold 22 lots of dry, salted elephant hides, ears, trunks, and feet. After the 1989 ban, poachers in Zimbabwe had not stopped killing elephants, so the hides had been accumulating. By 1997, they had a supply weighing 82.8 metric tons. Most of the hides were sold to companies in the United States and Japan. In the United States, elephant hide cowboy boots are now offered by Tony Lama and Justin. Sadly, The poaching and illegal trade in ivory continues to threaten the survival of elephants in Africa. Between January 2000 and July 2002, at least 1,063 African elephants were reported to have been poached for their ivory. During that time, customs officials and other authorities seized 54,828 ivory pieces, 3,099 ivory tusks, equal to 1,550 elephants, and 6.2 tons of raw ivory, equal to about 794 dead elephants. Illegal ivory poaching is an ongoing problem in Africa, threatening the existence of elephants and rhinos. Here, a soldier in Kenya examines a tusk seized after a 2003 raid. By the mid 14th century, when Mali was at its highest point of imperial dominance, the trans-Saharan trade had greatly increased because of Mansa Musa's fabulous pilgrimage and the resulting publicity in Cairo. Mali became better known in North Africa and the Middle East and even Europe. Stories of Mali's wealth drew an increasing number of North Africans to trading deals across the Sahara. In the decades following Mansa Musa's pilgrimage, Egyptian traders were regular visitors of Mali. The people who lived in Mali's commercial centers, such as Walata, were dressing in clothes imported from Egypt. Mansa Musa sent diplomats and opened an embassy in Morocco, which stimulated trade with the Maghreb, Northwest Africa. Ivory, slaves, salt, copper, and animal hides continued to be important in the trans-Saharan trade. But gold was the most important item. There were three principal gold fields below the Sahara. One of the main ones, which had also been a source for ancient Ghana, was at Bambouk, between the Senegal and Felemi rivers. Another, also formerly controlled by Ghana, was the Buri, north of the upper Niger, in what is now northeast Guinea. The third was in Akan territory near the forests and the modern republics of the Coast of Ivory and Ghana. Mali drew on all three gold fields for the trans-Saharan trade in precious metal. Merchants from North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe competed for the Mali gold. Mansa Suleiman. When Mansa Musa died in 1337, his son Mansa Magha became king. Mansa Magha ruled for only 4 years before he died. He was replaced by Uncle Suleiman, who was Mansa Musa's brother. While Mansa Musa had been very popular with his subjects, Suleiman was intensely disliked. Nevertheless, he was powerful and an effective ruler of the empire. There is an unusually large amount of information about Mali during the reign of Mansa Suleiman because the Arab geographer Ibn Battuta visited there in 1352 to 1353 and later wrote about it. It was customary for rulers of Western Sudan kingdoms to hold what were called audiences, during which ordinary citizens could submit complaints and legal disputes. Since these sessions were held in public, Ibn Battuta witnessed some. His description shows that the royal court of Mali was as rich and splendid as any in medieval Europe. Ibn Battuta described the palace throne as a lofty pavilion with curtain gilded arches on one side. When the Mansa was sitting in the pavilion, the curtains were raised and a signal flag on a silk cord was hung out a window as trumpets when blown and drums were beating. On other days, the Mansa held audiences under a giant tree where the throne was on a raised platform with 3 steps leading up to it. Above the silk cushioned throne was a large silk sunshade topped by a golden falcon, similar to the one at Mansa Musa's court. Whether in the palace or under the giant shade tree, the royal audiences were formal and grand. An honor guard of 300 soldiers lined up in ranks outside the palace gate, half armed with bows and arrows and half with lances. 2 saddle horses and 2 rams were always present. The horses were kept ready for the king's use at any time, and the rams were believed to provide protection against witchcraft. A royal wife in trouble. Among the events Arab historian Ibn Battuta witnessed while in Mali was an attempt to get rid of the king. One of Mansa Suleiman's wives was involved. Rulers of the Mali Empire normally had many wives, but the first wife had special status. Kasa was Mansa Suleiman's first wife. She was also his cousin, the daughter of the uncle of his mother's side of the family. Ibn Battuta said she had the status of a queen and was Mansa Suleiman's partner in rule, according to local custom. According to Ibn Battuta, one day Mansa Suleiman had Casa put in prison and replaced her with a wife named Manju, who was not from the royal family. Everyone at the court was upset because Casa was a popular aristocrat, and nobody knew why she had been in prison. Before long, Casa was released and was allowed to go out riding on her horse every morning with her slaves to accompany her. But because she had been pardoned for a crime, she had to stand near the monster's throne with her face covered by a veil. The events involving Casa caused so much gossip among the people around the court that finally one day the monster gathered them together and had his chief jelly, Duga, announcing to them that Casa had committed a serious crime. Then one of Casa's slave girls was brought in. She was tied up and was ordered to tell her story. The slave girl said that Casa had sent her to a cousin of Monster Suleiman named Jata, who had been sent away. Casa's message was that her cousin should come back and remove the monster from power. Her message, according to the slave girl, said, "I and all the army are at your service." When the court officials heard this, they agreed that it was a great crime and said Casa deserved to be executed. Casa, who now feared for her life, left the palace and sought a safe place in the mosque. When Ibn Battuta saw the monster exit the palace gate to approach the outside throne, he was wearing a golden headdress and a red robe and carrying a bow and arrows. Singers and musicians with gold and silver string instruments walked in front of him. Once the monster was seated, his deputies, counselors, and lesser kings were summoned. Each of the lesser kings had his own honor guard with lances, bows, and arrows. Marching ahead of them were drummers and trumpeters with elephant tusk horns. The tyrant, Marijata II. Mansa Suleiman died in 1360 after ruling for 24 years. His son Kamba took over the throne, but that same year, civil war broke out. Suleiman's sons and the son of his brother Mansa Musa were fighting over who would be king. Kamba died after only 9 months in power. He was followed by Marijata II. He was the grandson of Mansa Musa and the son of Mansa Maga, who had died after only 4 years in power. Mansa Maga had ruled the country for his father, Mansa Musa, while he was on pilgrimage. Then, when Mansa Musa died, Maga took over the power, but Mansa Musa's brother Suleiman was the next oldest and had expected to step into power when Musa died. Since Musa's son Maga died after only 4 years in power, it has been suggested that Suleiman killed him. Connections: sleeping sickness. Sleeping sickness is the spread of the tsetse flies, which lives only in Africa. They are slightly larger than horseflies and breed along rivers and streams. The flies live on blood and can drink twice their weight in blood each time they feed. This poses a serious health risk to both animals and humans because as they feed, the flies also transmit an infection of their central nervous system called trypanosomiasis. Tsetse flies start by biting an animal or person who is infected with a tiny parasite called a trypanosome. The parasite lives inside the fly's stomach for several days. Then it travels to the fly's salivary glands, after which any person or animal who is bitten becomes infected. The disease is commonly known as sleeping sickness because if left untreated, the victim falls into a coma and then dies. It is estimated that today more than 66 million people living in rural areas of Africa are at risk from the bite of the tsetse fly. Each year, an average of 25,000 new cases are identified according to the World Health Organization. Because this is a disease that strikes in rural areas, many sufferers are undiagnosed and untreated. Of the 36 countries in which sleeping sickness is a problem, 22 are actively involved in a WHO program to bring the disease under control. The most effective approach includes medical surveillance of the population that is at risk so treatment can begin early. Control of the tsetse flies and carefully monitored drug therapy. By 2005, WHO reported that the number of new cases throughout the continent had fallen between 1998 and 2004. The number of cases reported for both animals and humans fell from 37,991 to 17,616. The estimated number of cases is currently between 50,000 and 70,000. Once in power, Marijata II proved to be a vicious tyrant, a ruler who uses his power in cruel and unreasonable ways. He caused much suffering among his subjects. Ibn Khaldun talked to a man who lived in Mali at the time and was told that Marjata II ruined their empire, squandered their treasure, and all but demolished the edifice of their rule. One of the king's most notorious deeds was to sell a huge gold nugget at a cheap price to some Egyptian traders. The person Ibn Khaldun interviewed described it as a boulder that was regarded as Mali's most precious national treasure. After years of abusing his subjects and stealing from his country, Marjata II fell ill with sleeping sickness. Many Malians were probably relieved when he died 2 years later in 1373. Power struggles in an empire. Nobody knows the reason, but many of the descendants of Samhata and his brother Mandin Bori proved to be incompetent leaders. When Marjata II died in 1373, his son Musa was appointed to the next king. Mansa Musa II was not at all like his father. He was a fair, wise, and considerate ruler, but he was too weak to maintain control of kingship. Musa II had a very strong and ambitious advisor who managed to take control of the government. Although the advisor's name was Marjata, he was not believed to have been a member of the royal family. To avoid confusion, he is known as Marjata III. Musa II was still recognized Mansa, but he was kept hidden and became a mere puppet of Marjata III. Jata took all the power into his own hands. The Mali Empire had already been seriously weakened by the civil war that followed Mansa Suleiman's death and by irresponsible reign of Marjata II. Even though Marjata III was not recognized Mansa, he worked hard to revitalize Mali's imperial power. He sent the army into the Sahara to fight the Tuareg for control of the salt and copper sources near Takata. He also renewed or extended Mali's control over the eastern frontier beyond Gayo. Another power struggle between Mansa Musa II died in 1387. He was followed by his brother Mansa Maga II, who was also weak. Once again, a member of the royal family, was only a puppet ruler controlled by a powerful government official. Mansa Maga II was killed after only 1 year as king. He was replaced by Sandaka, a member of the imperial council. Sandaka had married Mansa Musa II's mother, but he was not part of the ruling family and had no real right to be king. After only a few months in power, Sandaka was assassinated by a member of the royal family. Finally, in 1390, the throne of Mali was recaptured by Mahmud Kita, a descendant of Suhata, the great hero. In their own words, a lion, a madman, and a powerful slave. The Arab historian Ibn Khaldun never traveled across the Sahara Desert, but even in North Africa, he heard reports about Suhata, who founded the Mali Empire. He also wrote about the other Mali rulers. Their greatest king, he overcame the Susu, conquered their country, and seized the power from their hands. Was named Marjata. Mari in their language means ruler of the blood royal, and Hata, lion. He ruled for 25 years, according to what they relate. The Mansa, called Khalifa, was insane and devoted to archery, and he used to shoot arrows at his people and killed them wantonly. So they rose against him and killed him. A later ruler was a former slave who usurped their kingship. His name was Sakura, and he performed a pilgrimage during the reign of al-Malik al-Nasir and was killed on the return journey of Tahura. During his mighty reign, their dominions expanded and they overcame the neighboring peoples. He conquered the land of Cao, which is Gao, later Songhai, and brought it within the rule of the people of Mali. Their rule reached from the ocean in Ghana in the west to the land of Takrur in the east. Y'all should know about Takrur. We dealt with Takrur. That has been known to be a repository of Jews, according to Arab geographers. Right? Anyway, Ibn Khaldun was born in Tunis in 1332 and died in Cairo in 1406. He spent most of his life in service to North African rulers and had access to diplomatic exchanges between Morocco and Mali. He is considered a great historian because he recorded historical traditions from the Malians whom he met. He wrote down the names of the people he interviewed, and he was very careful to provide the most accurate information possible. And here's an image of the area. You see Timbuktu, Walata. I believe Walata was in the ancient kingdom of Ghana before Mali took over. You see the Niger River, Janae, Gayo, more to the east. So you can see they ruled from this region here in Mali all the way to the Atlantic coast here. And there's Agdahus. We were talking about that yesterday's episode. There's Bambouk, the gold fields of Bambouk and Buri, which is all within their territory. They don't have this gold field here, but they have these here on the Benai River. It says spreading in the green area, as you can see here, is the Mali Empire circa 1335. And the Kingdom of Gaia is the blue area. It says here, spreading from the Pacific Ocean in the west to the city of Gaia on the east, the Mali Empire roughly followed the Senegal and Niger rivers. This map shows its approximate extent in 1335. Mahmud is the last of the Malian monsters mentioned by the Arab geographers. Others are mentioned in oral tradition, but they are not associated with any dates. So there's no way to know how they fit into the historical picture. By the end of the 14th century, generations of power struggles and weak leadership had undermined Mali's power. The time was approaching when it would be impossible to maintain control of the empire's distant frontiers. Mali lost control of Timbuktu around 1433, beyond the Niger Min. The more distant eastern provinces, including Gayo, had probably been lost before that. Sometime around 1460, a king of Gayo named Suleiman Dama attacked Mima, which had been one of Mali's provinces west of Timbuktu. After Suleiman Dama, the next ruler of Gayo was Si Ali Biri, sometimes spelled Sunni Ali. He transformed the kingdom into an empire that will replace Mali as the great power of the Western Sudan. This monumental pyramid tomb of mud brick was built around 1495 in the Songhai capital of Gayo after Askia Muhammad returned from Mecca. It is now UNESCO World Heritage Site. All right, so we're 47 minutes in and we already finished that one. So what I'm going to do is give you guys the Songhai Empire as well in this chapter. So let me take a brief intermission. I'll be right back. We're going to read this. We're going to read this. We're going to do this one, all right? Back. Just had to take a break. Every time I'm doing these videos, something happens. I have mucus build up and stuff like messing with my damn reading, man. Anyway, chapter 3, the Songhai Empire. Songhai was the third of the great empires in the medieval Western Sudan. The Songhai people came to dominate the eastern side of the Niger Bend. Eventually, they developed an empire that covered a vast portion of the Western Sudan. In ancient times, several different groups of people combined to form the Songhai. Among the first people in the region of Gayo were the Sorko, who established small settlements on the banks of the Niger River. They were specialists in everything that had to do with the river. They built boats and canoes from the wood of the calcidrot tree. This is an evergreen tree with fine-grained wood that can grow up to 90 feet tall. The Sorko fished and hunted from their boats, provided water transportation for goods and people. A second group that moved into the area to take advantage of the Niger's resources were hunters known as Gao. They specialized in killing river animals such as the crocodile and hippopotamus. The other known group of the time was called the Dou. They were farmers who raised crops in the fertile lands that bordered the river. Sometime before the 10th century, these early settlers were joined by more powerful horse riding people who spoke the Songhai language. These horsemen established control over the other people in the area. All these people together gradually began to speak the same language. They and their country eventually came to be known as Songhai. The dominant Songhai horsemen became recognized as masters of the eastern arc of the Niger Bend. The history of how this happened is not clear. Historians would not even know about the earliest dynasty of kings were it not for an ancient cemetery near a village called Sane near Gayo. Inscriptions on a few of the tombstones indicate that the dynasty ruled in the late 11th and early 12th centuries and that its kings had the title Malik. Other tombstones mention a second dynasty whose rulers had the title Zua, but only myths and legends describe Zua's origins. The Arab chroniclers describe a mythical figure named Zua Aliman, who is variously described as an Arab from Yemen. I know a lot of you guys know this story already about Zua coming from Yemen and Dunuwas and all that. I'm pretty sure the audience is familiar, heard this 1,000 times. This is a giant from the bush who could run as fast as giraffes and ostriches, or the killer of a monster fish god with a ring in its nose. And here's the thing about this story. A lot of Africanists don't like this story because, again, it's an external origin, or saying someone from outside of sub-Saharan Africa came there and became king or something like that. They hate stuff like that. But this could be the case. This is very much be the case. We've been reading about these kingdoms having far-reaching trades, going into other regions and taking people back, and people traveling towards these regions. This is not hard. And we do know Jews was here. We do know Arabians were here. They were familiar with these places. And then you have some people from the European continent coming to these places. So why is this so hard to believe? You know, you got to stop looking at the world through your colorless and racist lens, right? You're trying to look through history, trying to look at history with your modern racial theory. It does not work that way. So why can't this be the truth? Anyway, a giant from the bush who can run as fast as giraffes and ostriches, or the killer of a monster fish god with a ring in his nose. The kingdom of Gaio. Among the early people of the Niger Bend region were the camel-riding Sanhaja of the Sahara Desert. They were known locally as the Tuareg. They rode out the Great Desert to establish trading camps near the Niger River. As time went on, North African traders crossed the Sahara Desert and joined the Tuareg in their Niger Bend settlements. They all did business with the people living near the river. As the trade increased, the Songhai chiefs took control of profitable commerce. They settled on the left bank of the Niger at the place that came to be known as Gayo, which Arab geographers call Galgal. Between 750 and 950, while the Ghana Empire was prospering as the land of gold, far to the west, the trading center at Gayo became an increasingly important southern endpoint for trade across the Sahara Desert. The trade goods included gold, salt, slaves, cola, nuts, leather, dates, and ivory. And so, again, these West African kingdoms all were involved in the slave trade long before there was anything known as a transatlantic slave trade. And also, they was getting slaves from like Egypt and other Near Eastern places. As we read earlier, Mansa Musa had slaves from Egypt and some other Near Eastern localities. By the 10th century, the Songhai chiefs had taken control of the peoples who lived along the trade routes. Gayo was now a small kingdom. By around 1300, Gayo had become so prosperous that it attracted the attention of the Mali Empire's rulers and was conquered by them. Mali profited from Gayo's trade and collected taxes from its kings until about the 1430s. But then troubles in the Mali homelands made it impossible for them to maintain control of the distant territories of the Niger Bend. As Mali was becoming weaker, powerful new leadership was rising in Gao. It was about the time that the Zua dynasty was replaced by a new line of rulers who had the title of Si, short for Sun Yi. In the 1430s, the Mali Empire withdrew from Timbuktu and Gao. The Sea were then able to take complete control of their own kingdom. Around 1460, the Sea Suleiman Dama conquered Mima. This was a territory west of the inland delta that had been part of the Mali Empire for centuries. This showed that the Songhai would be able to take over some of the territories that were once on the fringes of Mali. And here's another thing too, about Yemen and all that being a part of its components. We do have EN 123 postulated to come from the west coast of Africa. So that would make sense. This would all make sense. And I don't want to get out this book and go to the paper, but there's a paper about the first free African American population in Palenque. And there's EM 123 found amongst them. EM 123 is a downstream clade of EM 35 and E1B1B. And it's a clade that's highly related to Jews, that's highly associated with Jews. So seeing this Jewish Yemen background here in West Africa is not too far-fetched. And we even know, and it is posited, that you have Eon 23 coming through West Africa. So this could be his clade. We don't know because we don't have his body, but it's possible, man. It's very possible. Matter of fact, it's highly possible. This is not something that's beyond the realm of plausibility.
It's possible. It's possible. It's possible. It's possible. It's possible.
All right. So it says this showed the Songhai will be able to take over some of the territories that were once on the fringes of Mali. Connections. Salt of the Sahara. This camel is being loaded with huge salt slabs, two to a side, after an overnight stop in Arwan on his way from the salt mines of Tawadini to Timbuktu, as you can see up here. Salt is essential to human life in hot climates such as West Africa's. The body especially needs salt to replace what is lost through evaporation and excretion. People such as the nomadic herders of the savannah eat a diet based on meat and milk, which naturally contains salt. Therefore, they can survive without eating additional salt. But those who rely mostly on grains and vegetables, such as the farmers, must supplement their diet with added salt. Traditional West African societies still live without refrigeration, as they have for thousands of years. So salt is also essential for drying and preserving fish and meat. Salt production has been a major industry in the Sahara Desert, at least since the 12th century. At Taghaza in modern Mali, about halfway between the Algerian and Mauritanian borders, salt is made by evaporating salt water in shallow pools called salt pans. At Taudini, 500 miles north of Timbuktu, salt is mined from about 26 feet underground, where several hundred men hack solid salt blocks out of deposits in an ancient seabed. Once removed from the mine, the salt is cut into large slabs and loaded onto camels. The camel caravans are guided across the barren, empty desert by a single tracker who has a special ability to read the desert and locate the wells along the route. To miss his route by even a few miles can bring death in a land where water is measured in drops and nothing grows for thousands of miles. Salt caravans have been known to include thousands of camels. The journey south across the desert to Timbuktu takes nearly 2 weeks. In Timbuktu, the salt is purchased by local merchants. They transport it down the river to large market towns of Mopti. There the slabs are cut into smaller chunks and distributed to markets throughout West Africa. C. Ali Berry. When Sli Suleiman Dama died in 1464, Ali Berry became the next see of Gayo and its surrounding lands. He was a very ambitious ruler. He was also a military leader with endless energy who was constantly on the move, leading his troops to hold off invaders and conquer new territory. See, Ali Berry means the great in Songhai, had a large, well-disciplined army that included cavalry. Whenever possible, Si Ali also used a fleet of riverboats to transport his troops with Sorko crewmen under a naval commander known as Hikoi. A river navy was very useful because many of Si Ali's military campaigns were in the territories bordering the Niger River. Once Si Ali had cleared the Gayo kingdom of its most immediate dangers, he turned his attention to gaining control of the entire middle Niger. This included the rich gold and salt trade that was passed through Timbuktu and Janneh. In our own words, rough trip, big disappointment. By speaking Arabic and pretending to be a Muslim traveling to Egypt, French explorer Rene became the first European to see Timbuktu and live to tell the tale. He started from the West African coast in April of 1827. After a miserable journey with months of illness and suffering, he arrived in Timbuktu on April 20th, 1828. The excerpt reveals Khalil's mixed emotions when he first saw the fabled city. At length, we arrived safely at Timbuktu, just as the sun was touching the horizon. I now saw this capital of Sudan, which had so long been the object of my wishes. On entering this mysterious city, which is the object of curiosity and research to the civilized nations of Europe, I experienced an indescribable satisfaction. I never before felt a similar emotion, and my transport was extreme. How many grateful thanksgivings did I pour forth to the protection which God had vouchsafed to me, amidst obstacles and danger which appeared insurmountable. This duty being ended, I looked around and found that the sight before me did not answer my expectations. I had formed a totally different idea of the grandeur and wealth of Timbuktu. The city presented at first view nothing but a mass, ill-looking houses built of earth. Nothing was to be seen in all directions but immense plains of quicksand of a yellowish white color. The sky was a pale red as far as the horizon. All nature wore a dreary aspect, and the most profound silence prevailed. Not even the warbling of a bird was to be heard. Khalil only stayed 2 weeks in Timbuktu. If he did not leave when he did, it would be several months before the next camel caravan left. He was afraid if he stayed longer, his true identity as a French Christian will be discovered. He reached Tangier in September 1828 and hid in the French vice consul's house until he could board a French ship and return home. In 1828, Rene host city Abdallahi gave him free lodgings in this house when the French explorer was not sightseeing in Timbuktu. He spent his time here secretly writing notes on what he saw. Note that he refers to this region as the Sudan. The region below the Western Sahara is known in Arabic as Bilad al-Sudan, land of the blacks. And the French called it Sudan in the colonial era. It became known as French Sudan. That area is now the Republic of Mali and parts of the neighboring countries. Taking Timbuktu and Janneh. At the end of 1468, Si Ali arrived with his Songhai Empire, an army across the river from Timbuktu's port of Kabara. The richest and most powerful Muslims of Timbuktu, religious officials, scholars, and wealthy merchants, and had been cooperating with the Tuareg people. They all wanted to keep control of the city out of Si Ali's hands. The Muslims were afraid that Si Ali succeeded, he would take revenge on those who had sided with his enemies. So they prepared a caravan of hundreds of camels for their escape. They fled to Malta, an important commercial city in the Saharan desert. In January 1469, Si Ali entered Timbuktu as many as feared. He allowed his troops to loot and burn the city and kill many people. The original Great Mosque of Janneh and Mali probably dated from the 15th century. By the late 19th century, it had fallen into ruin. The present mosque was rebuilt on those ruins in 1906 to 1907, as we see here. Here's an image of that mosque. It says here, Si Ali's victory over Timbuktu was a milestone in his career as a successful military leader. With the conquest, he took a major step in turning the small state of Gayo into Songhai Empire. After conquering Timbuktu, Si Ali continued to wage campaigns along the Niger River. He relied heavily on both his cavalry and his river fleet. This third most important city of Niger, Ben, was Janneh, which was roughly 200 miles southwest upriver of Timbuktu. Janneh was the key city in the inland Niger Delta for several centuries during the golden age of the Mali Empire. and into the period of the Songhai expansion. It is said to have been more famous than Timbuktu in medieval times because of its great amounts of gold shipped from there to North Africa. Janae enjoyed long periods of political independence. Janae was located in the floodplains between Benai and Niger rivers. The entire city, along with some of its farms and cattle herds, was encircled by a high wall. Added to Janae's security was the fact that for much of the year, when the Niger River was high, it was surrounded by water. Taking advantage of a high water season, Si Ali approached Janae with his fleet of some 400 boats full of soldiers. But the city's defenders were courageous in the resistance, and Si Ali's troops found it impossible to get past the city walls. Instead, they circled the city and settled in for a siege, a military tactic in which a city is sealed off so that people, goods, and supplies cannot enter or leave. The aim is to starve the city's inhabitants into surrender. The exact dates of Si Ali's attack on Janae are not known, nor is it certain how long the siege lasted. According to legend, the siege was more than 7 years, but this is probably an exaggeration. According to the scriptures written in the 17th century, Si Ali besieged Janae for 4 years, which is probably closer to the truth. Eventually, the people of Janae grew weak from famine and agreed to surrender to Si Ali. When they rolled out to meet their conqueror, Si Ali was astonished to see how the young chief of Janae was. Si Ali asked if he had been fighting a boy all those years. He was told the young man's father had died during the siege and the son had become ruler. Si Ali married the boy's mother and sent her to Gayo with rich gifts. Si Ali's last campaigns. Si Ali then set his sights on Walata, the city to which the Muslims fled when he attacked Timbuktu. Si Ali depended on his riverboats so much that he wanted to use them for the campaign against Walata. Even though it was far out in the Sahel where there were no natural waterways, so Si Ali laborers began digging a canal from the town of Ras El Ma at the western end of Lake Fagi Bine. From there, it was 120 miles from Walata. After Si Ali's laborers began digging the canal, he heard that the Masi ruler of the kingdom of Yatenga in today's Burkina Faso, which we read about the Masis and their Eurasian admixture as well this week. It says was on the way to attack him. Si Ali abandoned the canals project, marched his army against the Masi, and defeated them. He never did return to the canal project in the conquest of Walata. Si Ali won every battle he fought and conquered every territory he invaded. It is believed he was the only ruler ever to defeat the people of Janae. The more territory he captured, the more he had to keep traveling to defend and administer his increasingly large empire. The newly conquered peoples frequently rebelled, and hostile neighbors constantly raided the territory now controlled by the Songhai. In 1492, after holding power for 28 years, Si Ali died while returning home from another military campaign. He was followed by his son Si Baru. Baru only ruled for 5 months before he was pushed out by a stronger leader. And now you guys should all know this guy. Everybody watching this should know who Askia Muhammad the Great is. We all know who he is because we all read From Babylon to Timbuktu. We all read the claims that Askia Muhammad made an edict. Well, not a claim. He actually did that. Askia. Yeah. It does sound like Halle Berry, man. You know, I'm going to struggle with these words because I'm not a native speaker of none of these languages. But Askia Muhammad the Great is known for making an edict pushing the Jews out of the Niger Bend, right? So everybody in this community knows who this is. One of Si Ali's army commanders and provincial governors was Muhammad Tori. He was a very religious Muslim who had objected to Si Ali's brutal treatment of the Muslims in Timbuktu. After Si Ali died, Muhammad Tori challenged Si Baru for the leadership of Songhai. In 1493, after 2 fierce and bloody battles, Muhammad Tori removed Si Baru and became king. Askia was in rank in Songhai army with origins dating from at least the first half of the 13th century. Muhammad Tori took this title as the name of his new dynasty. From that time on, all the kings of Songhai were known as Askia. As one of the greatest of the Songhai rulers, Askia Muhammad, ruling 1493 to 1529, strengthened and extended the empire that had begun to take shape under Si Ali. He came to be known as Muhammad the Great and created a professional full-time army and built up the Songhai cavalry. He expanded Songhai control far beyond the territories of the Middle Niger and the inland delta waterways that had been conquered by Si Ali. Under Askia Muhammad, the Songhai Empire established lands on which the kings paid tribute. These extended northward to the salt pans of Takhasa in the Sahara Desert, westward to many of the former territories of the Mali Empire, and eastward to the Tuareg kingdom of Agadez. The empire grew so large that his army was divided into two parts, one for the western provinces based in Timbuktu and one for the eastern provinces based in Gayo. Here we have another image. It's probably a mosque. So the mud brick minaret is in Agadez in the modern country of Niger. Agadez was twice conquered by Askia Muhammad of Songhai. So here's the imagery here. Remember, we had a brother say that we all have a jungle culture. This don't look like the jungles. Two 17th century Timbuktu Chronicles, written accounts of historical events, named 37 sons of Askia Muhammad, had with various wives and concubines. A concubine is a woman who is supported by a man and lives with him without being legally married to him. He might have had even more. The total number of his male and female children is said to have been 471. The sons were mostly half-brothers related only through their father. These rival brothers, as they were called, did not have the kind of close attachment to one another that might be felt by brothers who had the same mother, known as milk brothers. As these rival brothers grew up, they became involved in bloody power struggles. When Askia Muhammad was about 70 years old, he found it difficult to control his sons. He was physically weak, and they pressured him to retire so one of them could become Askia. The royal court became a dangerous place for Askia Muhammad, even though the rebels were his own sons. The oldest of his sons living in Gayo was Musa. He was leader of the brothers who were trying to bring about a change in rulers. At this time, Ali Fulan, master of the royal household, would not allow anyone to see Askia in person. This further angered Musa. What the sons did not know was that Ali Fulan was hiding the fact that Askia Muhammad was blind. Finally, in 1529, Musa publicly demanded that the power be given to him. The elderly and blind Askia Muhammad had no powerful supporters, so he gave in to his son and stepped down as king. Musa became the next Askia of Songhai, although his father lived another 10 years. Once Musa became king, he started killing his rival brothers one by one. Many fled to Walata, Timbuktu, and other towns. The killing continued for 2 years until 1531. Then some of the surviving brothers joined together and killed Askia Musa in a bloody battle. The reign of Askia Musa lasted only 2 years and 8 months. After killing Askia Musa, the brothers returned to Gayo. They expected their leader to be the next Askia. But when they got there, they found their cousin, Muhammad Bokana, already sitting on the throne. Askia Muhammad Bokana, ruling 1531 to 1537, is remembered for decorating the Songhai court with splendid furnishings, introducing new kind of musical instruments, and providing his courtiers with imported clothing. He humiliated the daughters of Askia Muhammad by forcing them to appear at court with their faces uncovered. According to their Muslim beliefs, this showed that the sisters were impure. Askia Bokana further insulted Askia Muhammad and all his sons by having the court storyteller continue to repeat, a single ostrich chick is better than 100 hen chicks. Everyone knew this meant the son of Umar Kamat Diaka, Bokana's father, is worth more than 100 sons of Askia Muhammad. When Askia, this nigga was petty, right? Anyway, when Askia Bokana took power, Askia Muhammad was still living in royal palace. But Askia Bokana sent him to be imprisoned on a mosquito-infested island in the Niger River near the city. Askia Bokana had been friends with Ishmael, one of Askia Muhammad's sons, since childhood. Ishmael had fled when Musa started killing all his brothers. Now Askia Bokana wanted this cousin to join him in Gayo. However, because Ishmael actually had a stronger claim to the throne, Askia Bokana was concerned for his own safety. So when Ishmael arrived, the king had him swear on the Quran that Ishmael would never betray him. As an extra precaution, Askia Bokana had his daughter Fati marry Ishmael, so his cousin was now also his son-in-law. One night, Ishmael went to visit his father where he was in prison. The blind man took hold of his son's arm and asked him why, with such strong arms, he was leaving his father to be eaten by mosquitoes and croaked at by frogs. Ishmael replied that he had no power to do anything, but his father convinced him to contact powerful allies who would help. In 1537, while Askia Bakana was away on a military campaign, Ishmael overthrew him. Askia Ishmael released his father from the island and brought him back to the palace. In gratitude, Muhammad presented Askia Ishmael with the ceremonial clothing that went with the high Muslim office of Caliph, religious leader. A green robe, green cap, white turban, and Arabian sword that Muhammad had been given on pilgrimage to Mecca when he was Askia. Muhammad lived into his 90s and died in 1538 during Askia and Ishmael's reign. Askia Ishmael reigned for 2 years and 9 months and died a natural death in November 1539. From anxiety to prosperity. When the leading men of Shanghai heard about Askia Ishmael's death, they peacefully agreed the next Askia would be Ishaq, ruling 1539 and 1549, another son of Muhammad the Great. Of all of the Askias, it was Askia Ishaq who inspired the most fear and anxiety among the Shanghai people. Despite being a devoted Muslim, Askia Ishaq regularly sent agents to Timbuktu to demand large sums of money from the merchants. Islam prohibits bribery and demands for money. Fearing for their lives, nobody dared complain. The amount of money demanded was so great that it damaged the economic prosperity of the Shanghai Empire and gained Askia Ishaq many enemies. He began to fear that he would be overthrown. Anyone was suspected of opposing him was quickly dismissed or killed. In 1549, when it became known that Askia Ishaq was dying, his brother Dawad went to visit a Shanghai sorcerer called a Sahansi. Some people believe that the Sahansi worked a magic spell that eliminated Dawad's chief's rival. Whether or not this is true, Dawad became the next Askia. Together with Si Ali Berry and Askia Muhammad, Askia Dawad ruled 1549 to 1582 and is remembered as the third of the Shanghai Empire's greatest rulers. The empire remained stable and prosperous under his rule. Up to this time, all the Askias had been sons of Muhammad, with the exception of Muhammad Bukhana, who was a nephew. Many other sons of Askia Muhammad had held offices and titles. During the 34-year reign of Askia Dawad, or Dawud, however you say that, as the important officer became vacant, he usually appointed his own sons to the positions. In this way, Askia Dawad gradually eliminated from high office the descendants of other sons of Askia Muhammad. From Askia Dawad's time forward, all the Askias were his descendants. Askia Dawad's accomplishments. Askia Dawad reigned for more than 30 years. During that time, he reorganized the Shanghai army and won victories over the Tuareg raiders of the Sahara and many neighboring non-Muslim peoples to the south. Dawad also fought off invaders from all directions who tried to capture the rich resources in the inland Niger Delta. He succeeded in most of his military campaigns, although a struggle with the Moroccan Sultan Muhammad al-Shaq caused the temporary loss of the salt mines at Takhasa, 1557. Askia Dawad was widely praised for memorizing the Quran and for supporting learning and religion. As part of this support, he is said to have established public libraries in his kingdom. Nevertheless, after his death in 1582, warfare broke out among the brothers competing for power. The winner was Askia Muhammad. He is notably different from the other Shanghai rulers because he never organized a military campaign. Soon after he took power, he developed a painful medical condition on the lower part of his body that kept him from leading his troops. He also never killed any of his brothers, but after nearly 4.5 years, they became impatient with his poor health. In 1586, Askia was replaced by his brother Muhammad Bani al-Hajj and died soon after. Askia Muhammad Bani. When Muhammad Bani, ruling 1586 to 1588, became Askia, one of his brothers complained that the most foolish of their father's son had become ruler. This brother and several others who had agreed with him were killed by Muhammad Bani as soon as he was in power. During Askia Bani's reign, the town of Kabara was the scene of events that led to a civil war. This war eventually spelled disaster for the Shanghai Empire. Kabara is Timbuktu's port on the Niger River. Two of the most powerful men in Shanghai lived there. One was Alu, the chief of the port, and the other was Muhammad Sadiq, the military commander. Sadiq was the son of Askir Dawad and was popular with the leading men of Timbuktu. Alu was, was an officer in the service of Askir Bani. The Timbuktu historian Ibn al-Mukhtar describes Alu as an oppressor and a stubborn tyrant. In 1588, Alu whipped and jailed one of Sadiq's men. Sadiq responded by killing Alu. Sadiq took all of Alu's property and declared a revolt against Askir Bani. Accompanied by other Shanghai commanders, Sadiq began to march with the army toward Gayo. The Shanghai historian Abid Rahman al-Sabri, born 1594, in the Tariq el-Sudan, History of Sudan, wrote that when the Askir heard they were coming, he said, "May God curse kingship, for it is a source of humiliation and degradation." And we got another map here, and the purple is the Shanghai Empire circa 1520, and then you can see the gold fields below that. It says by 1520, the Shanghai Empire extended so far northward that it controlled of the rich salt mines of the Sahara was envied by Morocco. Shanghai's power was anchored by the three greatest cities of the medieval savannah. Its capital, Gayo, Timbuktu, which was the center of the learning and salt trade, and Janneh, the main shipping point of gold from the south. Askir Bani set out from Gayo with his army to battle with Sadiq and stopped at midday to take a nap. The Askir was overweight and was wearing a cloak made of a chainmail, armor made of closely linked metal wire. During the hottest part of the day, when the servants came to wake him to get ready for the midday prayer, they found him dead of a heart attack. Askir Ishak II. The next descendant of Askir Dawad to take the throne was Ishak. He became known as Askir Ishak II, ruling from 1588 to 1591. His immediate problem was that the people of Timbuktu were still loyal to Sadiq. With Askir Bani now dead, Sadiq wanted to overthrow the new Askir and grab power for himself. Sadiq's army swore loyalty to him and were therefore in revolt against Askir Ishak II. Sadiq was so popular with the people of Timbuktu that they held a celebration in his honor that included beating drums on the rooftops. When Askir Ishak II learned what was happening, the armies of Timbuktu and Gayo met in battle. Sadiq was defeated, and he and all of his Shanghai officers who had joined in his rebellion were captured and put to death. There were so many executions that Shanghai lost many of its finest military commanders. Hundreds of the soldiers on both sides had also been killed in battle. Askir Ishak II appointed new commanders, but he could not replace the dead troops. Sadiq's rebellion had caused the loss of a large portion of the Shanghai army. At the end of 1590, Askir Ishak II received news that an army from Morocco was on its way to attack Shanghai. He assembled his newly appointed commanders to discuss plans for the defense against the Moroccan threat. But they could not agree on a strategy, and so Shanghai was not prepared to meet the approaching invaders. The Moroccan invasion. Al-Sadi and Ibn al-Mukhtar, two 17th century Timbuktu historians, tell a story that may or may not be true about an incident leading to the Moroccan invasion of Shanghai. It is claimed that sometime in 1589, a slave born in Shanghai royal house named Wood Kirinfield was imprisoned at Taghasa in the Sahara. The slave escaped and fled to Marrakesh in Morocco, where he claimed to be a brother of Askir Ishak II. Wood Kirinfield supposedly wrote a letter to the Moroccan Sultan, Moulay Ahmad al-Mansur, ruling from 1578 to 1603, encouraging him to invade Shanghai. Al-Mansur wrote to Askir Ishak II, demanding, among other things, payment of 1 mittal, a measured unit of gold, as a tax on every camel load of salt to lead the mines of Taghasa. These salt mines were in disputed territory halfway between Shanghai and Morocco. Askir Ishak II sent an insulting reply, accompanied by a spear and a pair of iron sandals. The sandals meant that until the day Al-Mansur wore out those sandals, Askir Ishak II would never agree to his demands. The idea was that since the sandals were made of iron, they would never be worn out. Even before the escaped slave had contacted Al-Mansur, the Sultan was aware that Shanghai could be a source of gold. slaves, and other riches because he had a spy living in Gayo for several years. Al-Mansur used Askin Ishak II's challenge as an excuse to send an expedition to attack Shanghai. Timbuktu Chronicles and Tombstones. During the 16th century, when the Shanghai Empire was at the height of its power, Timbuktu was a great center of learning. There were many schools teaching the Quran and authors writing books in Arabic. After Shanghai was conquered in 1591, Timbuktu and other cities were administered by Moroccan officials called Arma. In Timbuktu, there were Muslim scholars of Sunnite descent who wanted to defy their conquerors by recalling the glories of the Shanghai Empire. Their writings are still among the most important sources for the history of Shanghai. Two 17th century Timbuktu historians who traced their own ancestors to the Ghana Empire described the various government offices in the Shanghai Empire, named some of the important men who held them, and described some of their deeds. They were Abd Rahman al-Sadi, born 1594, who wrote Tariq al-Sinan, Chronicles of the Sinan, in about 1656, and Abd Muhammad ibn Mukhtar, who wrote Tariq al-Fatah, Chronicles of the Searcher, around 1665. These two books have been circulating in the community. I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with the Chronicles of the Sinan or the Chronicles of the Searcher or the Tariq al-Fatah. I actually own that one. It says, when studying these chronicles, however, it is important to remember that the authors relied on oral tradition for a lot of their information and that they were reconstructed Shanghai history in defiance of Moroccan rule. Another important source of information about Muslim ruling dynasties and other Muslims of Shanghai is a large collection of inscriptions, mostly in Arabic, written on tombstones. Several cemeteries have been found in the ancient cities of the old Shanghai territories. The earliest of the tombstones date about 1013. And it's from a site called Isuk, which was in the medieval commercial town of Tatmaka, north of Gayo in the Sahara Desert. The cemetery near the village of Sanay, which is about 5 miles from Gayo, contains royal tombstones from around the beginning of the 12th century. Some of the Sanay tombstones are made of Spanish marble. One of them marked the grave of Abu Abdullah Muhammad, who died in 1100. In Arabic, the name Abdullah means slave of God, signifies someone who is a devout Muslim. So from the tombstones, we know that by this time, the kings and dignitaries of the land were devoted Muslims, that their trade network extended all the way to Spain, and that they were wealthy enough to import expensive Spanish marble. The Mitkal. In Damascus, Syria, at the end of the 7th century, the Islamic world began to mint its own coins. In some parts of the Middle East, units of money, then as now, were referred to as dinars. When gold coins were first minted in West Africa, their value was based on the Syrian gold dinar, and the coin became known as mitkal. One authority gives the official weight of the mitkal in the 17th century Syria as 4.25 grams, but the actual weight of the mitkal varied greatly in different times and places. In West Africa, during the Shanghai Empire, for example, a mitkal will be worth a weight of 1,000 cowrie shells in one place. In another place, it could be valued according to the weight of 24 seeds of the carob tree. In later centuries, a mitkal signified various fractions of ounces. Therefore, the best way to describe the mitkal in early West Africa is a small but valuable measure of gold in the form of dust, nuggets, or coins. Al-Mansur chose as his commander Jaldar Pasha. Pasha is the word that denotes high rank of office. Jaldar was an Islamic convert of Spanish origin. The Moroccan army set out at the end of 1590 with about 4,000 fighting men, including some 2,000 foot soldiers with muskets, a type of light gun with a long barrel, 500 musketeers riding horses, 1,500 Arab spearmen, and 70 Christian slaves armed with arquebuses, an early portable big gun, arquebuses. Some of the Moroccan troops probably wore chainmail armor, which was introduced to Western Sudan about the same time as firearms. It took about 10,000 camels to carry all the invading army supplies, these including 4 small cannons, 10 mortars, 4 shooting stone balls into towns. They also had to carry large quantities of gunpowder, tents, and other supplies for the troops, and enough food and water to last them for a journey of at least 40 days across the Sahara Desert. When the Songhai heard the Moroccans were coming, one of the Askia's commanders suggested they send soldiers to fill in the desert wells to deprive the invaders of water. Instead, Askia Ishak II sent messengers to ask Tuareg chiefs to fill the wells. Not only did Tuareg lack any loyalty to Songhai, but the messengers could not even get through because they were attacked by bandits. Jaldar Pasha's troops found the wounded messengers in the desert, still carrying the Askia's message. The Songhai's leadership failed to act quickly. The Moroccan crossed the Sahara and then took 2 weeks to recover from their exhausting desert journey. The decisive battle took place on March 12, 1591, near Tumdidbi, which is 30 miles north of Gaia on the Niger River. The Songhai suffered heavy losses and retreated across the Niger River. They were shielded by courageous troops who protected their rear and fought to death. Askia Ishak II then tried to buy off the Moroccan invaders. He offered Jaldar Pasha a tribute of 100,000 gold pieces and 1,000 slaves, hoping this would satisfy the Moroccans and that they would leave Songhai. By the time the Moroccan troops were exhausted and ill, Jaldar Pasha was prepared to accept the tribute and retreat back across the desert. However, back in Marrakesh, Al-Mansur decided he wanted to retain control on the newly conquered land below the desert. He rejected Askia Ishak II's offer and replaced Jaldar with Mahmud Pasha. Mahmud had instructions to complete the conquest of Songhai. The Moroccans occupied and looted Timbuktu, Gayo, and Janneh. They sent the wealth of these cities back to their capital of Marrakesh, where it was used to build fine palaces. Moroccan firearms. The arquebus was invented in the mid-15th century. It used a serpentine or S-shaped piece of metal with a central pivot attached to the side of the gun. The upper part of the serpentine held a burning piece of hemp or cotton rope soaked in a chemical called saltpeter that burned easily. By pulling on the bottom half of the serpentine, the upper part holding this burning match was lowered into a pan containing a charge of powder that fired the gun. I know you guys can imagine this and envision this because we've seen this stuff in movies. We've basically seen the same exact contraption in movies. More advanced muskets that were also carried by the Moroccan army began to appear in Spain during the early part of the 16th century. The musket was considered the largest and most powerful gun an individual soldier could use. Most were 5 to 6 feet long, weighed around 20 pounds, required a fork rest to support the gun during firing. The simple serpentine of the arquebus was replaced with the more advanced spring-operated trigger to lower the match into the pan. Before the Moroccan invasion of Songhai, there were very few, if any, firearms in that part of Africa south of the Sahara. In 1591, the soldiers of Songhai had never seen the arquebus or musket. Just the noise they made gave the Moroccans a big advantage. What remained of the Songhai army retreated into the countryside. They rebelled against Askia Ishak II and placed Muhammad Gayo on the throne. But Askia Muhammad Gayo unwisely accepted an invitation to visit Mahmud Pasha and was assassinated. Led by Askia Nu, a brother of Muhammad Gayo, the Songhai continued their resistance to the Moroccan occupation. For 2 years, they fought small but successful ambushes. Excuse me, y'all, I'm having nasal problems, so I'm trying to fight through it. Excuse me. Give me a minute. Hold on. I tried to fight through it.
It's possible. It's possible. It's possible. It's possible. It's possible.
Man. Turn me up, man. All right. Where were we at? Ain't nothing to it but to do it, man. All right. Anyway, for 2 years, they fought small but successful ambushes against Mahmud Pasha and his troops until Mahmud finally gave up and returned to Timbuktu. Noah fought until 1599, but the Moroccans continued to occupy Timbuktu and other urban centers. The Songhai leaders were never able to recover their empire. The great cities of the former Songhai Empire were under Moroccan control. It did not take long for the peoples who had been conquered by the Songhai to assert their independence and begin raiding one another. In the early 17th century, Tuareg nomads of the Sahara began making raids into the Great Bend of the Niger River. The cattle-herding Fula of the inland delta formed their own state called Massina and began attacking their neighbors. Bamana warriors from upriver, southwest of Songhai, laid siege to the Janae and fought with the Fula. Armies from kingdoms and present-day northern coast of Ivory and Burkina Faso also began advancing into southern regions of the former empire. By the 18th century, the former heartland of the Songhai Empire was occupied by several small states. And that's part one. Part two, we're going to deal with the society and culture of the Soninke people of the Ghana Empire, the Mani people of the Mali Empire, and then lastly, the Songhai people. So the first two parts that we did and we covered here on YouTube dealt with pretty much the historical side of things, some archaeological side of things, oral testimony. The second part is going to be dealing with the society and culture. So stay tuned for that. I apologize. I was struggling through some of this reading because I had nasal issues. I'm like, as soon as I do this video, that want to come up, but hopefully you guys were able to retain some of the information and it wasn't too bad on your ears. So we will be picking up and continuing this and finishing the book. We're 46% through the book at this moment. We will definitely get through this. This obviously looks like a jungle guy. You know, shout out to Jungle Brother. Said we all come from jungle culture, right? So this will be, we'll pick up here and we will deal with the culture of the Soninke people and society of the Soninkes, the Mandi people, and the Songhai people. So stay in tune. Oh man, come on, bro! You from New York? And you don't know where that come from? I ain't gonna even tell you now. You know what I'm saying? You from New York? That's embarrassing, bro. How you from New York and don't know that? Come on, man. Think Buffalo. That's all. I'm gonna give you a hint, man. Buffalo. That's all I'm gonna say. Buffalo. Buffalo, brother. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the lesson. Enjoyed the reading. We will be finishing this book in its entirety. You know how we do, man. Yeah, Jay. I'm serious about beating down ignorance, man. Y'all gonna learn. Happy Black History Month, y'all. I'm doing this as part of my Black History package. We will continue to read this book, man, and finish it. Anyway, we out. 7 candlesticks up, and I've been telling you niggas, it ain't a debate. It's a stick up. Gang.
Thank you, Fizzle.
He ran up on a chop, he's a boxer. Pow, right in the kisser. It's a stick, that's a drum, I'll drop some, nigga. Pow, right in the kisser. I'ma shoot the K until the cops come. Pow, right in the kisser. We did him like that, cause he's a spot burner. Pow, right in the kisser. Pull up with the stick with the drum, who won't run with me? Pow, right in the kisser. Stupid shells dumping out the chop, it's 100. Pow, right in the kisser. I'ma pull it out the Louis bag, don't come for me. Pow, right in the kisser. I just dumped a nigga in some Christian Louboutins. Pow, right in the kisser. I just shot a nigga granny house, don't care who in there. Pow, right in the kisser. I can't trust the niggas that I hang with, they be shooting kids. Pow, right in the kisser.
I smoke a nigga like a Swiss or a pack of cigs.
Pow, right in the kisser.
I pull up with a chop on the ops and split a wig. For real.
Pow, right in the kisser.
I broke his bitch, he popping, now I'm popping on fed.
Pow, right in the kisser.
We didn't drop by, we walked him down, put him in a ditch.
Pow, right in the kisser.
I got this FN across a nigga, treat him like a Christian.
Pow, right in the kisser.
And my Christian Louboutins running, chasing me a victim.
Pow, right in the kisser.
This 762's flipping, I put him in a blender.
Pow, right in the kisser.
A bartender, I give him shots, now he look drunk like he on liquor.
Pow, right in the kisser.
Those are not Glocks, buddy, those are ghost guns.
Pow, right in the kisser.
My homie smoked too many ops, he don't got no lungs.
Pow, right in the kisser.
223 shells, nigga, that's for King Kong.
Pow, right in the kisser.
Go play that Roof Chris, bitch, that's my theme song.
Chris every time we laugh shit.
Pow right in the kisser.
In this belly backpack is a big strap.
Some shit that really can't even fit in his back.
Pow right in the kisser.
He got flip hollows, turned him to a Big Mac.
Turn his dumb ass to a burger or something.
Pow right in the kisser.
Dead man, that's a homie you can't get back.
He's no longer, he can't come back.
Pow right in the kisser.
Stripping every buster nigga at them kickbacks.
They have no chains on them.
Pow right in the kisser.
Riding around the city with two straps, I feel like John Wick.
Feel like that,
Pow right in the kisser.
Caught in front of that stove, so I flicked him like a bit.
like a lighter.
Pow right in the kisser.
Bitches choosing sides cause they know we the shit.
Hey, them niggas, we got sticks.
Pow right in the kisser.
But we don't give them shit, we just run them, then we dip.
We did. We run them in
Pow right in the kisser.
Bro drive 50, so I have to place the order.
the order.
Pow right in the kisser.
Chop his head off and throw his body across the border.
I flipped him like a quarter.
Pow right in the kisser.
You was not a slaughter nigga, you the hood porter.
Those are the stones get them shit.
Pow right in the kisser.
You could date the bitch if you got the feed to afford her.
You can't buy that nigga.
Pow right in the kisser. He's never coming back in that stack. Pow right in the kisser. I'ma shoot it till my hand cramp. Pow right in the kisser. I ain't finna go in bareback, bitch. Pow right in the kisser. You love me, then come let my friends crash. Pow right in the kisser. I caught him like in the C class. Pow right in the kisser. They gon' have to run a beat back. Pow right in the kisser. You go against the team, you need cash. Pow right in the kisser. I caught his mama at the repass. Pow right in the kisser.
Another nigga dead, you gotta deal with it.
I mean, it's been a long ass time ago.
Pow right in the kisser.
You an internet thug, I'm in the real trenches.
He just pop it on the ground, weird ass nigga.
Pow right in the kisser.
He wanna squabble up, I wanna kill niggas.
I'ma hit him with this chop, we ain't gon' box.
Pow right in the kisser.
I'm from the stink team and saw real niggas.
We run this shit, y'all weird.
Pow right in the kisser.
I nutted her face and told her deal with it.
Splashed all on the motherfucker's face.
Pow right in the kisser.
I was cooking in the county on the grill, nigga.
I was whipping up all type of fancy shit.
Pow right in the kisser.
I was really in K-Town taking field trips.
Ling Ling, May Ling, Kim Wong and all.
Pow right in the kisser.
All dome shot, we tryna split wigs.
We tryna rearrange some shit.
Pow right in the kisser.
Man, niggas know what the fuck going on, nigga.
Pow right in the kisser.
Man, he's never coming back in that stat, nigga. Man, let that shit go, bro. Like,
Pow
shit
right
is
in the
ridiculous.
kisser.
Like, you niggas still holding on to grudges and all that shit from 3 years ago, man. Like,
Pow right in the kisser.
I'm just saying, like, y'all niggas, like, it's come on, bro. Like,
Pow right in the
like,
kisser.
it's over with, bro. Like, man, like, come on,
Pow
bro.
right in the kisser.
He's never coming back in that stat. Like,
Pow right in the kisser.
like, just face it, bro. Like, y'all just holding on to this shit, like, nigga.
Pow right in the
What y'all
kisser.
gonna do? Wait till somebody else get flipped? Like, what's going on?
Pow right in the kisser.
Yeah, exactly, nigga. Yeah.
Pow right in the kisser. Pow right in the kisser.
Pow right in the kisser. Pow right in the kisser. Pow right in the
Pow
kisser.
right in the kisser.
Come on, bro.
Pow right
He's
in the
no
kisser.
longer.